Hello and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. The Irving Police Department's duties go way beyond solving cases and responding to emergencies. There are also a lot of services provided for crime victims. On this program, we're going to learn more about those specialized programs available at Irving's Family Advocacy Center. Viewers were invited to submit questions via email and social media, and we'll be getting those answered throughout the show. Our guests are Victim Services Supervisor Heather Koval, Jim Sears is the police sergeant assigned to the center, and Gwen Bain is a bilingual therapist. Thank you all for being here.
Welcome.
Well, this is serious stuff that we're talking about today, but it's good that you're able to answer the questions we have and so many people have that sometimes can't often ask you. So we want to make sure that we do to get all those questions in. And we want to start with you first, Heather. Give us just a broad overview. What is the Family Advocacy Center?
Well, the Family Advocacy Center was designed to be a coordinated community response where when someone is a victim of a violent crime, they can come to one facility, meet with a detective, get set up with counseling services, meet with a victim advocate to understand what their rights are, what the process is going to be through the criminal justice system. And also for some of our clients, Child Protective Services needs to be involved. They're also housed at our building. So it's one place that they can come and meet with a bunch of agencies that are going to address some of those needs that they're going to have.
Which is very, very important to have that one location, and I've heard some of the reasonings why before, and we'll share that in just a minute. But first I want to ask you, Jim, how did it get started?
It was a concept that was really before the building was ever built. The concept of having this coordinated community response to domestic violence was initiated with the police department back in the mid to late 90s, and it grew, and it was an idea of just having that one place to go for everybody to be taken care of, to have, you know, the crime victims services, the counseling and everything, so they're not going to 15 different places like you do in a lot of other places. This is one of the few places around the United States, and about the only place in Texas that has a center like this.
Which is really good, and that brings us back to that being that one location, Heather, and let's just touch briefly on that because you guys both have pointed out having one location, and then when you mention children too, it's extremely important for victims, period, but when you're talking a child, just overall, why, for those watching right now, they're going, well, why is it important to have one location? Can you explain that?
Well, once a trauma has occurred, it's very challenging to start having to find all these different buildings and facilities and agencies, meet with a detective, all these appointments that people have to make. And so that becomes overwhelming when they're already going through a crisis in their personal life. And so having it just one place, and so that they meet with the detective, they seamlessly move in and meet with a victim advocate, seamlessly they can get set up with a therapist that same day. It just makes the whole process much easier through a very difficult situation. And for a lot of our clients, transportation is an issue. So if you're thinking about having to go to 6 different agencies, and everyone is demanding it right now because we're in a crisis and we need to figure out exactly what happened, is there any risk factors, does anyone have any major safety concerns right now, do we need medical evaluations done? There's a lot of big decisions that need to be made within a very short period of time. And so, you know, transportation complicates that, finding the agencies and those types of things. So it just makes it a lot easier during a very stressful time for the victim.
And then the victim won't have to tell that story over and over and over and over again, right? I'm sure that makes a huge difference. Now, I'm sure there are several ways a person may interact with you, but one is after they do become a victim, you get their names from police, or how do they get in contact with you?
Anytime an offense report is generated through the Irving Police Department, our Victim Services Unit gets a copy of that offense report. So we're initiating contact with victims of violent crime as quickly as possible following the offense report.
I see. And then what happens next?
Well, we work with the victims to identify what needs they have, any safety risks or elements that we need to address with them to develop a personalized safety plan. We make them aware of resources that may meet some financial needs. For a lot of victims, maybe they had medical bills as a result of the crime. Maybe their rent money was stolen as part of the crime. And so getting them set up with financial services and programs that may be able to alleviate some of those stressors, we want to connect them with those kinds of agencies. For some of our victims, it's not safe for them to stay at their residence, so we can start looking at where do they need to be in order to be safe, whether that's a shelter with a family member or friend. And so we kind of help them develop that plan for the next 2 or 3 days. How do we stabilize this situation and get them the support that they need in order to start the healing process?
Wonderful. And Gwen, I know sometimes you have people referred to you through schools. Explain to me when that case would be. What kind of case would that be?
Well, sometimes there's behavioral problems in the classroom, and the teacher might send the student to the counselor. If she, in talking to that child, starts seeing a pattern or a behavioral problem in the home, they might send that family to us to start providing counseling for them.
Wonderful. And then this is switching topics a little bit here, Jim, but one of your responsibilities is actually involving missing people. How do you respond to those cases?
It depends on what kind of missing person is. We got the people that'll leave and they've just wanted to leave, but then you'll get the people that are the Alzheimer's patients or adults suffering from dementia, and then you'll get the autistic children that'll disappear and everything, and the runaways. So we have a couple of detectives that work strictly just working these kind of cases out to try to find these people and locate these people. We had a really good success story today. A guy was missing out of Indiana or Ohio, one of those states, and mom thought he was here, and the officer was able to track him down. He didn't want anything to do with his mom, but now mom knows he's safe and taken care of, and he's living out on the streets. But the mom now has some satisfaction in knowing that he's safe. He's still alive.
Wow, that's got to be comforting for that mother. There's so many different categories, as you just mentioned there, where it could be someone that wants to be on the streets or wants to be away, as that person that you guys found today, and let the mom know he was okay. But then you said also there may be the elderly, and I know lately you see on the street signs flashing up when you go by, elderly missing, or this may, be something that you look for, the license plate. So how do you guys work with the different departments to figure out how you're going to go about finding them, or what you're going to do? Because that's a lot.
There are certain standards that are put out for the state to be able to get those signboards and stuff going. So it's great if the families can have certain documentation that we know we need. If you have an adult that you're taking care of, father, uncle, mother, that you're taking care of, and they're starting the stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, to have a medical documentation of it, have their vehicle information ready. We have a file that we keep on as people can call in and give us this information, or we can meet with them and get the information, or we can get it when the report is taken. But if we already have that stuff on file, then when they do turn up missing, or if they do turn up missing, we already have the stuff in place to start processing it and getting the flyers ready. And we already have it set up with different agencies to print flyers and to contact and what goes on. But the sooner we can get that information, if they have a doctor to verify what's going on with them and everything, it just speeds up the process. It helps the process in getting started faster.
That's great information, because so many of us, like I remember my driver's license number, but I know there are a lot of people who do not know their license number or even their license plate numbers, and then thinking about their parents' license plate numbers, they may not know, but to write those things down is very important, because you never know what will happen. And going back to the child that you found today, that's just really impressive to me, and it was from a mother calling from another state.
Yes.
So how did that work out? She filed a missing report?
She filed a missing report in that state, and for some reason they got track or something that he was in Irving and contacted us, and Detective Bergeron followed up on the leads he had and everything, and where he found a pattern that he might have been following, and was able to set up at that location today and actually found him as he was exiting the location, and talked to him, had a great interview, with him and everything. He's okay. So.
That's a wonderful, wonderful story. There are cases where kids are actually not runaways, they're just missing, and parents are looking for them. What should a parent do if that's the case? If their child's missing, or maybe their child ran away and they think they're missing, what do they do? They come home, their kid's not there, what happens next?
It's usually the police are called, and we initiate a response by patrol that goes out there and starts our preliminary investigation. And then according to what factors come into it, whether we are called out or not, and then when we do call out, we follow the AMBER procedures that are out through the National Missing Clearinghouse and stuff for children, and there's a series of events. It's a checklist, and once you go down and each thing's checked off, then you move on to the next thing and everything.
Okay, and that's good that you pointed out the procedures, because oftentimes working in the media, you hear different people say, oh, well, I reported someone missing and no one's doing anything about it. They're not talking about it in the media. The police haven't made it an Amber Alert, but you can't just make every case that you get an Amber Alert.
Amber is a very specific and controlled program to be able to do the Amber Alert, and there has to be certain criteria met. It has to be, a known abduction. They have to be in danger and certain other things. We have to have leads that we can put out. So, we always have the Amber ready to go, but we have to meet that criteria before the state will even process it and put it out.
Okay, and that advice is similar to the elderly relatives too, when you have, is it the Silver Alert?
Silver Alert. Mm-hmm.
So same situation. Okay, and Heather, what kind of counseling services are available? Because especially when people are dealing with these kinds of things, I mean, whether it's a person that's on the streets that you may find, or the person that could be a victim of domestic violence, or that mom that you spoke to out of state. Of course, she's not here in Irving, but what kind of counseling is available for those who need it?
Well, our unit specifically does crisis counseling. So our goal is to identify any risk factors, develop safety plans, and kind of stabilize the situation. Okay. Once we've identified that maybe they've got emotional trauma that needs to be dealt with through long-term counseling, we refer them to the counseling center downstairs. So it's a great, easy process that they can get set up directly with ongoing counseling. And so Gwen, if you want to address some of the options that you have available.
For instance, we had a case where they did have a runaway, and so they came and spoke to Jim and his department. They then spoke to Heather in her department, Victim Services, and she identified that the family was a blended family that had recently become married, had step-parents, stepchildren, and so forth, and that they had a lot of conflicts in that family, and there was some chaos, but they didn't know about us. So she sent them down to us. We met with the family, we talked to them, we identified where some stuck points were in that family, different family members who were having trouble communicating, and we met with dyads and triads within that family, helped them learn better communication, form better patterns, gave them some skills to take home and utilize in their home. So it was a win-win for that family. They found the child, the family was reunited, and now they know we're here for them.
Well, since you've mentioned that, thank you for explaining that and describing that. So I'm sure there's some people out there listening right now going, well, when do we know that we need to take that step and be proactive? When do we need to seek counseling, whether it's through the child's school or whether it's, counseling they seek outside, whatever it may be? When do they say, okay, maybe there's some concern, because there's so many blended families these days, and it's not just about that, or whatever it may be. It could be a work problem, whatever they're having problems with. If they need some kind of counseling or therapy, you don't want people to wait till it's too late or they think they can't, get any help. Exactly. So when do they say, this is the time I need to get help, whether it's for themselves or for a loved one or for their child that may need counseling dealing with what they're going through? Sure.
Well, I would pretty much advise them to think about it like they would taking a child to the doctor. We have a lot of home remedies that we do, but sometimes we just get that feeling in our gut that I just don't feel comfortable caring for my child at home anymore. And the same is true with counseling and emotional needs. If a parent feels something in their, that they just don't feel like they're meeting the need of this child or a family member, I think that's a good time to reach out and see if counseling is available for them, and we can certainly meet with them and help them.
Wonderful. And we've talked about the blended family situation, but what are some of the other situations that may cause you to need to work with a child?
There's often divorce situations where the adjustment period is really hard for a family member. That's a typical situation after different crimes that happen. If there's a robbery or an assault in the family, domestic violence, a lot of those family members may be really distressed about that and need some help adjusting afterwards. So those are typical things that we talk to clients about.
I see. And Heather, with so many sensitive cases, what's done to protect confidentiality?
Well, we our staff are licensed, and so we have to abide by our ethical standards that are put forth by our licenses. We are employees of the police department, though, and so we're working as an arm of the police department. So we're working in direct collaboration with the detectives and those kinds of things. So we let our clients know up front we are working as a part of the police department, but that if there's information that they do not want discussed with the detective, that we will honor that up to the limits of confidentiality. Things like child abuse, abuse of the elderly, we can't honor confidentiality in those situations. If someone's homicidal or suicidal, those are situations that we may have to release information. But other situations, for the most part, we want to make sure that the client feels safe and feels comfortable talking to us. Many victims call in and they don't want to tell the police department yet. They don't want to make a report yet about what's happened. And so the great thing about that is, since we're not licensed peace officers, we can listen to their story, talk to them about what might happen if they choose to make a police report. They don't have to tell us their name or anything. But since we work hand in hand with the detectives, we kind of see day to day what happens with these cases. Right. So for some victims, once they hear that, they think, oh, I do want to make a police report. This is exactly the process I need to go through. Or maybe they find out that I don't want to make a police report. I need to file for a protective order, or those kinds of things, options that they didn't know about before they spoke with us.
Wonderful. And when you talk about this and people opening up to you and that you're working with the police department, sometimes it may get really hard to get them to open up. So I want to ask that and address that a question to you, Quinn. How do you get people to open up and tell you what's really going on? I'm sure you probably get people that come to you saying, I need help, but then they don't want to tell you what they need help for.
Well, their experience may be of course different for every situation, but they may need to be informed of their rights, their privileges that are available for them, and what would be the consequences of different actions that they might take. And with that information, that helps them make a better decision about who to open up to and how to do that.
Wonderful. And Jim, we want to ask you a couple of more questions too, of course, and one of them is about the programs you're involved in. One is called First Offender. Tell me about that one.
The First Offenders Program is based for Families for Change. It was started in Georgia, at the University of Georgia, and it's taking the offenders that have been in a nonviolent crime like theft or maybe some small drug possession or something along those lines that can have had no prior history, and we bring them in it's a 10-week program, and they have to attend with their parents, so that and it basically goes back and teaches them to be a family again, and it takes it back to the root issues of getting them to understand that maybe eating a meal together, how important that it can be, and how these studies have come on, and there's counseling they go through with the group, and there's activities they go to reinforce this, and through this program. If they complete the First Offenders Program and then maintain no offenses for 6 months after, then that crime is kind of exonerated. It kind of goes away.
How successful has it been?
We've monitored it now for 3 years and kept up with those that were qualified to attend that didn't attend, and those that didn't successfully complete it, versus those that completed it and recidivism or repeat offenders. You're running about a 60% repeat offender rate for those that didn't attend. We're running about less than 10% on people that did complete the program.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a very successful program, and it's the only program set up like this west of the Mississippi. So we're real proud of the program and everything and what it's done and how we've used it there. And the county started, and you look at it, and other agencies are starting to look at it because of the success it's had.
Wonderful. And Heather, I want to go back and talk to you a little bit about what we were speaking of just a minute ago. We talked about the victims that you work with, but what about the family members of people that they think need help? Sometimes the victims aren't going to come to you, and so there's a lot of people out there who are concerned about their loved ones. What can they do?
Sure. Well, for family members, it's really difficult to know what to say, what to do, what not to say. And so those are things that we certainly have helped parents and sisters and brothers know, how do you handle a situation where you know that your daughter or your sister is in a domestic violence relationship? You know, for a lot of families, it's tempting to tell the victim how bad and awful the suspect is, and they've seen the injuries on their loved one and the bruises, and they're scared for their loved one. And so they're trying to tell their loved one how awful and bad it is. But in reality, a lot of times that only helps the offender, because we see relationships where an offender will tell the victim things like, your family doesn't want you to be happy because they don't want you to be with me, and those kinds of things. So what we let family members know is, don't focus on the offender, focus on your loved one. We love you, we care about you. If there's anything that we can do to help you, we want to do it. We see that you're hurting and we want to support you. Those kinds of things where they're focusing on how much they love and care about that victim, and being there to support the victim. And families get very frustrated, understandably, because part of the dynamic of domestic violence is that victims often return. There's hope that the offender's going to change. There's a lot of connections to the offender. They've got children, they've got a home together, they've got finances. There's so many reasons why victims stay. And so helping the family understand those dynamics and understand that this is part of the process.
So you're there to help with that too.
Right, so we can help them
Wonderful.
understand some of those things.
Good. And you mentioned the word change in there, and I know, Gwen, you have some changes coming in the fall. Tell us what that's going to be. What's going to happen?
Sure. We've redesigned our group counseling so that when the parents come for parenting classes, we're also going to have 2 other groups available, one for small children and one for the older children, to also receive some social skills and some of the same information their parents are getting in their class, but of course developed for their age group. And we're real excited about that, because like Heather mentioned before, transportation can be a problem, so can childcare. So if she has a place, or he, a mother or father, that are coming to parenting class, have a place to take their children to also receive services, we hope that'll be a benefit for them.
Definitely, and I'm glad you mentioned that. You talked about transportation and childcare, but there's a lot of things that we may not even realize victims go through. What are some of those common challenges they face?
Well, housing becomes a big issue for some of our clients. Medical bills, you know, people don't think about unexpected medical costs that come along with being a victim of a violent crime. And then the emotional trauma. You know, people may have difficulty focusing on their daily tasks, or, you know, being able to care for their children, or any of those kinds of things. And so there's a lot of extra complications that come with any of those things.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about domestic violence just now. And Jim, I want to ask you, we often hear people keep going back and giving their partner another chance. What's your best advice in those situations?
That's a really difficult question, because the studies show that a victim will leave up to 7, maybe 8 times before they finally leave. And working through that with them each time, knowing, even, you know, this is the first time we're seeing it, that they may leave, but they're going to go back. It's just going to happen. And then working through it and being patient enough to be able to work with them through it till they can come up with a solution themselves and understand it. Also knowing if they leave and if they don't have a proper plan, they're not prepared, that can be just as dangerous for them. So we want to make sure through the victim services and counseling that, yes, there's these situations going on, some of them criminal, some of them not, but just leaving on its own is not the best thing either. Have a plan, work through it, develop this plan so that when you're ready to leave, you can leave.
Wonderful. And a lot of people hear the worst outcome when you're watching the news and you say, oh my goodness, that horrible story that just came on there about a woman being a victim of a crime where they lost their life because they kept going back and didn't get the help and didn't get out. But you're telling us that it's important to have that way to get out and to do it safely, and that's where you step in and help them. Wonderful. And also I want to talk about this. There's one program that raises awareness in a fun way called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. Will you tell me about that, Heather?
Sure. They've been doing it for the last couple of years, and it's an event to bring awareness to sexual assault. And so what happens is it's a male-driven program, and they wear high-heeled shoes and walk a mile in women's high-heeled shoes. And it's just symbolic in the sense that nobody can really understand what a victim goes through.
We're checking out some of the video. It's pretty funny. So they can't really understand, so you want them to experience.
Right, and so it's just a small way that you can experience what a victim may be going through, the discomfort, the awkwardness, the fear of what other people might say about you because of what you're doing. And so it's a way for men to experience some of those things, and it's a fun event. They have fun. Most of them have never worn high-heeled shoes before, so we have a teaching opportunity for them, a lesson.
Right.
And so it is a really fun event, but it really does bring awareness.
It's not easy being a woman.
That's right.
And it brings awareness.
It brings awareness about sexual assault. So.
Wonderful. And Gwen, I want to ask you this too. Sometimes you have to refer victims to other agencies. Why is that done?
Well, if we feel like we don't have the expertise there at the Family Advocacy Center to meet the need of a client, we want to do that quickly when they first come to us to get them to the place that they need to be to get the help that they need.
And a lot of people are getting help from you. And I know we do have to make sure it's confidential, so we don't want you to say any names, but can you tell us about any of the success stories without giving out too much information, just so we can kind of have an illustration? You gave us a great one just a minute ago, Jim, that just happened today. Do you have any other ones you can share with us, Heather?
Sure, and sometimes we don't know about the success until several years later. I actually had a victim who came in recently and met with one of my interns, and she'd been a victim of domestic violence back in 2004. Wow. And she came in due to something going on with some other family members, and she said, I came up here because I knew I could get help here. And she said, back in 2004, they predicted for me exactly what was going to happen. And she said, I heard it and I denied it. But when I was ready, I knew what I needed to do, and I was able to get out, and I've been living on my own successfully for the last 3 years. And so to me, that's a great success. The fact that we provided information, that they were aware when things started happening, these are the risk factors, these are the common things that we see. She was able to identify those things and recognize those things and be able to have a plan to get out when she was actually ready to do so. And so that's a wonderful success.
I love it. And then also, when you were talking about that, it just reminds me, sometimes people think that you know, a victim is one category, one type of person, and that's not the case. It can be the person that lives next door to you, it could be someone at work, it could be someone at church, and any age, right? Victims.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it could be anyone. That's just so sad to hear about that. What about you, Gwen? Do you have a success story you'd like to share?
Sure. We have families from many different cultures in Irving come to us. We had one family that was from, excuse me, a totally different, a Middle Eastern type culture that came to us. And I was so impressed that after this mother and child met with a counselor, that they were able to feel comfortable enough to share their family problem. And our counselor talked with them, actually went with that mother and child to another location to help them work through a family incident that had happened to them, that she was afraid with her culture, if she went to that place, that she would not be accepted. So they went with her, helped her solve that problem with the family, and then came back and followed up with counseling for several weeks. And I was just really impressed with that intercultural working.
Yeah, it is very impressive. And we are just about out of time. Y'all have been very impressive today with all the information you've been able to share with us and the stories that I'm sure have just, you know, brightened some hearts and touched some hearts, especially the one you shared, Jim. And I want to ask you, Heather, how do people go about getting in touch with you? Because there may be someone watching right now who needs help, knows someone who needs help, or has some questions for you. How do they get in touch with you?
Of course, an emergency, we want people to call 911. But if it's not an emergency and they need to speak to someone specific to a victimization or a trauma, they can call us at 972-721-6550, and that calls right into the Victim Services Unit. If they need to speak to any of the departments at the Family Advocacy Center, they can call 972-721-6555, and that's our automated system, and they can select what department they need to speak with.
And what's that number again?
972 721-6555.
And for those who may be a little fearful of calling, you're a little worried or concerned, when they call, because you are in the department with police, does that automatically, you kind of touched on this before, but for those who are going, I want to call, I want to get help, but I don't want to file a report right now. I don't want police coming to my house. I don't want that causing a problem. That's not going to happen,
No,
right?
not at all. Not at all.
Wonderful. And Jim, in closing, is there anything you would like to add?
Domestic violence is such not such a growing problem, but a problem that's not going away. You know, we're proud of our reduction in a lot of crimes in the city, and we've had a steady reduction in crime. But the two crimes that we keep investigating that haven't gone down but have increased over the years have been domestic violence and child abuse. It's a growing issue that more education and more understanding needs to be out there, and programs like this are going to help us.
Wonderful. Thank you all for helping us understand more what it is that you do in your department and how you're helping people every day. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Starling.
You're welcome. And thank you for watching. I'm Starlene Stringer. Please be sure to join us on Thursday, August 15th at 1:30 for our next edition of Open Line. Our topic will be the DART Orange Line. Now, if you have questions, you can go ahead and get those in by emailing ictn@cityofirving.org or connect with us on Facebook. That's our next edition of Open Line, and we will see you then.